Thanks, Jill, already with the community's Bulls last night, Martin the night before. So we're really into the swing of it. Thank you very much. We've reached a new milestone for our council. This is the first time that we've gone into an LTP process and consultation with communities via Zoom and projected through Facebook. So we'll be able to answer your questions as they come up on chat function. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself and thank staff. So I'm Andy Watson, I'm the Mayor of the Rangitikei. I'm now in my 8th year as Mayor. I did, I think, 9 years as a councillor prior to that. So I've been around a little while. And I live in Martin. We have online Councillor Jill Duncan. Jill, would you like to just introduce yourself? You need to turn off your mute function to do that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Duncan. I'm one of the 3 Northern Ward councillors for the Rangitikei District Council. So Taihape is the town closest to me, but of course we all work for the whole district, and it's really a pleasure to be here as part of this long-term plan build-up, and it's my first time. So, and this is the first time, as Andy said, that we've done this online live, so it's actually quite exciting, and I hope you send in lots of questions.
Thanks, Jill. Luke, as a staff member, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us your role and your function?
Thanks, Andy. Kia ora tātou. My name's Luke Deutsch-Bailey, and I'm the Digital Transformation Advisor at Rangitikei District Council. So my job covers basically helping the council use technology to be more efficient and effective.
Thank you very much, Luke. And I have also with me my PA, a shared PA between the Chief Executive, Peter Beggs, and myself. Karen Kauper is with me, and this has all been set up by Lisa as a staff member, introducing us to the new technology and managing the chat show function. What I intend to do tonight is run reasonably quickly through what is an LTP, what's the process from here, and take any questions as they come up on the chat function. Sorry about that. Right, first of all, what is an LTP? So every council must have what's called a long-term plan, or for short, LTP. Essentially, this is where council looks at a 10-year plan, focusing on the first 3 years, and really it's about what services we're going to provide, what's the vision of council moving forward, what are the assumptions we've made to support that? For instance, an assumptions, how many people are likely to be in our district after 3 years, after 10 years, and possibly even over the next 30 years. By the way, I'll drop the first secret there. Council thinks that our population could go to 25,000 people by 2050. We're currently sitting about 16,500. So for the first time ever in the last, at least the last 2 or 3 decades, we're getting substantial growth. Not only do we have to look at the vision and what services we're going to provide, but we also look at what's it going to cost to provide it, and essentially who's going to pay, which is the, I suppose, the tough part about it. And of course, the way that people pay is via, to a large extent, rates and costs for the services we charge. The tricky part is balancing the expectations of people and the services we're wanting to provide against the affordability of council. And when we start talking about the services we're going to provide, there's always a section of the community that says you should be concerned only about roading rates, rubbish. And as councillors, you'll hear that quite frequently. And they will say, why are you interested in such things as housing and social services and climate change and all of those things? Well, we're legislated to do so by central government through a function called the four well-beings. So that is part of the core function of government nowadays. So moving along reasonably quickly, there are a number of things we did differently this time around in our long-term plan. And this time we went out fairly early with a number of groups and said, in terms of pre-engagement, so the things that we're going to be discussing in our long-term plan, including the key questions we'll be asking, some of those have come from community saying this is something we would like. And later on, we'll probably have a discussion around free Wi-Fi. That wasn't necessarily dreamt up by councillors. Was a number of people within the community coming to us and saying, hey, this is something you should provide. So that helped us draft the LTP. The next thing, for those of you who have been through this process a lot before, you may be thinking you're holding these long-term plan meetings and where's the documentation? Every other year, we've been able to go to a document. This was a previous one called Shaping Our Future or Unfolding the Plan. And that document laid out exactly what we were going to do, the key choices and the decisions we'll face and what your rate positions would be at. And so in the LTP discussion with communities, you could exactly see what the situation would be. The apology is we haven't got to that stage yet. So we presumed at the start of setting of these LTP meetings that we would have that document ready. And why hasn't that happened? Essentially, we need to go through a legal process to produce a long-term plan for discussion with communities. And that process means that we work out all of the budgets and we get all of our financials together and we present them to a government agency, loosely referred to as Audit New Zealand. And Audit New Zealand have to go through all of the documentation, including what we call the draft long-term plan, and say, tick the box, we're good to go, council can approve this, and it goes out into the community. That was certainly our expectation. However, all sorts of challenges presented difficulties that meant that we are running behind. Believe me, we will not be the only council in this space. There will be a number of councils that are still struggling to have their LTPs audited, and there will be some councils, and hopefully ours won't be one, that will be finally adopting a consultation document and subsequent approval of the LTP in July. The ideal is that you have the LTP finally approved for council in this financial year. And our council financial year is a little bit different to most businesses. So it runs from June, July. So we expect at this stage to adopt on the 12th of April, the consultation process. And I may repeat this later, but I will just run through now around the next steps in the process. So council would look to adopt on the 8th of April with submissions to our long-term plan opening up on the 12th of April right through to the 10th of May. And you can submit online, you can submit written letters to say this is a formal submission to the long-term plan. And you can tick a box, and if you want to, you can appear in front of councillors and express your views, or you can just write in. All submissions will need to be replied to and considered by council before we can formally adopt a long-term plan prior to June. So that's the process. And of course, during that, when you have questions during this process, you can either get in touch with me direct, you can get in touch with the councillors, or you can request to start with some help. I'm just looking at my chat function every so often, people saying hi to me, and that's all. Remember, we will take your questions on chat as we run through this evening. The challenge is really as to why we and audit are running behind times are important. And it's very easy to blame COVID. But the reality is that COVID has played an enormous part in council functions over the last year. It's strained our resources, both with trying to manage the process around COVID and also have people literally in buildings. We've had to go over to Zoom functions for a lot of council activities. That's just the way of it, unfortunately. But we've also had a really nasty one of great importance. So the government has come along and said, we want a discussion around how councils manage what we call the three waters. So the three waters are the provision of wastewater services, drinking water, or potable water as it's called, and stormwater. So why has government got interested in this? If you think back to Havelock North, they had a contaminated water supply, people died, but it could have been many, many times worse. And then we've had Christchurch and Kaikoura, and those communities have struggled with burst pipes and so on. What government realised was that the infrastructure, or below ground, the pipes and networks and the treatment plants had under investment over a long time. It's sort of understandable because our towns were built the thick end of 100 years ago, and for 60 or 70 years, those pipes were fine. And suddenly you reach a stage where they're at the end of life. And if you read the Dominion, you'll see virtually every second day on the front page, burst sewer, roads closed, contamination of the harbours. That's part of the underinvestment. And government tells us on a per capita base, by the way, small councils are the worst. So we have those challenges like every other council. Now, we've been investing fairly heavily over the last few years trying to survey where we're at, what we can do, and we're putting significant money into fixing those resources. But government has said, we think it could be more efficient if there was what we call an aggregated model. And this is where you might have a company in Wellington, for example, supplying all of the water, drinking water and connection water for half of the North Island, and you could have another one in the north supplying the rest, and you might even have only one in the South Island, and exactly the same provision in terms of wastewater. What government has said is that councils need to make that decision as to whether they opt into that sort of model this year. The reality is that there has been very little information that we've been able to put in front of customers and ratepayers. That's made it really tough. And whereas there is a catch-up mode with councillors and staff that's happening on a weekly basis, we're still a long, long way about being able to make that decision. So what we've decided as a council, like most other councils in the country, is that we will assume that we will continue to provide those services. So it's a sort of business as usual. By the way, if everybody thinks Andy's looking down at the table all the time, unfortunately it's the angle of the camera above us. So my apologies that I'm not looking way up all the time. So how's that impacted on us preparing our LTP if we're going to go business as usual? So government came out with a taster and they said, we will give you $4.8 million this year. In fact, we'll do it right away. And in exchange for you providing all of the information on the state of your assets. We thought, great, and we'll use that money to put in a new sewer line between Martin and Bulls and pipe the effluent down to one new treatment plant, something that's been in our planning for quite some time. But the workload on staff getting that data together for the three waters has been unbelievable. And we have a staff member, head of infrastructure, called Arno Benedy. He's been absolutely chasing his tail, getting that information together, and I appreciate the enormous amount of work that he is faced with. But what that has meant is all sorts of other work has had to be put on hold. So the finalising of our infrastructural budgets and so on have been tight, shall we say. The other problem that we've had and challenge, and it's a very significant challenge that is peculiar to only a few councils. We are rated on capital value. So when we send out a rate demand, a fair chunk of that is based on the value of your particular property. So we've just recently gone through a revaluation of the district. And I note there's a number of people, I think there's about 22 people currently watching this. So thank you and welcome on board for those who are taking the time to understand this. So recently you would have got, as a ratepayer or a resident, you would have got a note in your letterbox to say that your property used to be worth, let's say for argument, $100,000, and it's now worth $200,000. And you think that's great. And then there's this suspicion, I suppose, oh, will my rates go up? It's a pretty common thought because we rate on capital value. If all properties went up at exactly the same ratio of rating of capital value increase, which is done by a company independent to council, we have nothing to do with setting those valuations. But if they all increased at the same rate, it wouldn't be an issue at all. It wouldn't affect the distribution of rates. However, what we are seeing is dramatic changes between various sectors of the community and various property values. So in urban, if I take, those are the houses in our towns, if you live in the southern part of the district, Bulls, Martin, Scott's Ferry, Koitiata, and places like that, then your property probably has gone through some dramatic valuation increases. And even within that sector, if you had a low valued property, if you'd bought a home for say $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a few years ago, it could be worth $350,000 or near $400,000. So there's been some very dramatic swings. The higher value properties haven't increased at the same rate. So this creates an impact on rates with capital value. So the rate increases for lower valued properties are significantly higher than higher valued properties. What does this mean? Technically, within the because our plans haven't been audited yet, I'm not really meant to give you specific figures, and I've got to be careful I'm not in breach here. But for instance, if we had a rate increase proposed as an average rate increase, let's say for argument just under 7%, which would be very comparable to our neighbours, by the way. So if you had a rate increase of 7% on average across the district, what it may mean is that if you have a lower valued property in the southern part of the district, you could face a rate increase of 20%. the higher valued properties would face a lower rate increase, but a similar dollar value. So if you have a higher valued property and it goes up only 10%, then it's probably not going to be too far away from the lower valued properties that go up a higher on a dollar value. Now, in the urban sense, in the rural sense, we face exactly the same sorts of difficulties. So rural north has increased quite dramatically in value. Rural south hasn't. In fact, has been relatively flat in valuation increases. So some of the rural south properties and farms, the southern end, may even face rate drops or very low increases. And I'm talking on a general nature here, of course. There'll be individual properties that are different to that, but rural north, they could be facing rate increases of near 20%. And because they're higher valued properties, of course, they could face significant rate increases. Smoothing and balancing those effects is really difficult. We realise that if you have your property's gone up dramatically in value, that's great, but it doesn't change your ability to pay. And that's the difficulty that councils face when they rate on a capital value base. So I'm anticipating questions, and look, if you don't want to question us tonight on chat, then you can email me or you can get in touch with your councillors. You can say, hey, Andy's explained this, but where will I sit and what's the likelihood? Well, first of all, when we get the LTP consultation document out, you'll be able to look at comparable rates from your area, and there'll be a mathematical calculator that you can literally calculate the rates that you will face next year. So that's the challenges. I am looking forward to getting that formal document out there because it will answer a whole lot of questions. And for instance, if you're in Martin or Bulls, where I have spoken in the last couple of nights, I have promised to go back to those communities with an offer to go back and have another major meeting where we can talk absolute specifics. So what's in the document? As I said, the consultation document includes a significant number of key choices. And for example, we are looking at the financial and infrastructural strategies. And one of them is a key choice that we're going to need feedback. And that is because council are considering as a preferred option that we provide free Wi-Fi in Bulls, Martin and Taihape. And I know there will be people out there that say, how can it be free Wi-Fi if you're telling us that there's a rate increase that's associated with that? Yes, that's unfortunate, but that's where it sits. What would it mean? It would mean an increase, by providing that service, first of all, would mean an increase in our debt because we have to set it up. It would mean probably somewhere between $2 and $3 in terms of a per capita increase. In other words, that money would go on your rates. These sorts of things, we will be looking for answers from the community. The other things that will be going out around things like the event sponsorship fund. So currently we assign $25,000 to event sponsorship. And our district is known for its events. In fact, I know that Palmerston North City would love to have the number of events and the variety of events and the spectacular scenery that we have in our space. But $25,000 is not a lot of money to spread out amongst those events. And we're saying, should we consider upping that to $50,000 a year We're looking at increasing the funding for economic development. We went through a development increase last annual plan, and we're looking to increase it again. So last time, what happened, people say to me, okay, we gave you a whole lot of money for economic development. What's it been used for? And that's a very fair question. So I talked about this in Bulls last night because I answered this specifically there, and it is worth spending a minute or two on. So we knew that we needed more people in our district. We'd faced a steady decline in population for a long time. And then the district becomes unaffordable if that continues to happen. And you get schools that struggle to maintain either their syllabus and people go elsewhere for specialist subjects, or private schools struggle to survive. You get builders, painters, plumbers, all of those people saying there's not enough work for us, we need to scale down. Or potentially you get businesses close and relocate. We knew that we had to do something about that, so we put in a series of incentives. For instance, if you build a new home or relocate a home to our district, you get $5,000. For the developers, we put some incentives in place there. We know our towns are characterised by earthquake-prone buildings, and we thought if we do nothing to support those building owners, we will end up with a derelict main towns. So under earthquake-prone legislation, the legislation says that your building has to be brought up to 34% of a new code. And if you don't do that, in 15 years' time, you need to demolish the building. That's a very simplified version of the legislation. So we had some building owners that said, and have been saying, I can't afford to do this, or I'm interested in doing this, how can council work with us? So we said, okay, we will consider some rate solutions. So for instance, if a business upgrades and strengthens their business and has to close for a period of time to facilitate that, have a discussion with us. And we might say on a case-by-case basis, we won't charge you rates while you're undergoing that refurbishment. Or we'll consider setting aside some of the internal council consenting costs. There's a whole raft of economic development things we've got involved with. You know, we've looked at a major district plan change from rural to industrial, and we have a number of very large businesses wanting to come here on the basis of that plan change. Initially, that plan change was funded by council. Fortunately, now that plan change process is being funded by government because we received a very major grant, around $9.1 million, to put in place new rail sidings and to support that process and to be able to provide the infrastructure essentially needed for new businesses. Sorry, I have a chat that's come up, and sorry, it's just a note from councillors. I will acknowledge there are a number of councillors online. I noticed we've got Jill there, we've got Fidel Getty, and some others. So thank you very much, councillors, and I thank you for your attendance at the public meetings around the district. The next possible one is, and I might get Councillor Jill Duncan to comment on this in a minute. So just a warning, Jill, and remember when you comment, you're going to have to mute yourself. Sorry, take yourself off mute. So there's been a lot of discussion, for example, in Taihape, and we're building a new amenities block there. And there's been a lot of talk around the old grandstand, which is an amazing building there. The cost of refurbishment and protection of that building could be up to $1 million. So we'll be wanting feedback around your particular views, and And remember, if you're from Martin or Bulls, you're providing funding for this as well. But Jill, to give them people a break from my voice, would you like to make any comment?
Thank you, Andy. Yes, this is quite dear to Taihape's heart, whether you want the grandstand or not. Most Taihapeans are very pleased to talk about the subject. The Heritage Group has, the Taihape Heritage Group has got itself organised and is promoting various buildings throughout Taihape, and they're looking to actually make a register of buildings, and the grandstand is very much part of that. So we're really looking forward to this being one of the key choices that's going into the long-term plan consultation document, and then everyone can have the opportunity to say what they think about the saving the grandstand and the cost it will mean for the district and how they see that going forward. So I'm really excited about that being in there.
Thank you, Councillor Jill Duncan. Fee, I see that you're online. Please let me know if you'd like to speak about any matter. Have you got anything that's concerning you at the moment? We'll come back to you. So, Council is going through a very, very major investment program. And I talked about Three Waters earlier, and I've said we'll regard business as usual. So some councils around the country are saying, why would we invest now when it might not be our issue in the future? A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, if we opt in, the loans that we take out to start that work and get it underway would be taken over by a new company as such, which cannot be privatised. So government has taken extreme pleasure in pointing out that there will be a protection and a shareholding back to authorities in some shape or form. So we've going to invest significant money, for instance, on wastewater upgrades. There's probably over 10 or $11 million to be invested in provision of water, for example, because we know the issues of water in not only Martin, but the other towns is important. We know that we have consenting things that we have to deal with in places like Ratana and Martin. In fact, most of our communities over wastewater. So we want to see that work carried on, and by doing it, by carrying on, if it is taken over, it virtually locks in a process for a new authority. We're happy to do that. We think it's essential for our communities. If they are taken over by a new authority, then it certainly makes it easier in terms of our debt position, because historically our council has had very, very low levels of debt. We will move to a very significant debt position within this long-term plan. We know that we have to invest not only in these infrastructural things, but we still have replacement buildings that we have to consider, such as the Martin administration block, the Taihape administration block, that by law we have to consider under earthquake-prone legislation. With the Martin build, we will go out with a separate consultation process this year around that, because it's going to be such a big deal. And we haven't got enough information to clearly put the position together for this long-term plan. So we've allowed money within the long-term plan for replacement, but we've allowed money in the first year to make sure that we get that consultation process right. And we know that we have to take on board the lessons that have been learnt from the Bulls Centre. So suddenly our district is going through a revitalisation driven by the huge number of new people wanting to come here, but also driven by council direction as well and incentives. we are in an incredibly exciting space. And when you look at the assumptions, as I said earlier, we could face, and we know that we're facing a very significant population increase now. We know that iwi, for example, will be one of the predominant forces economically within our district. Look, I'm going to close off reasonably soon, unless we're getting chats coming through. If we do get chats coming through, I am looking to close off at about 5 to 8, because the alarms are going to go off in this building unless I do something about it. But we welcome the conversation. I think I have about 20 or 30 more public meetings. And some of those are right out the back of Hunterville and Taihape, our beach communities. The plea from me is get engaged. The worst thing you can do is say after the fact, you've done the wrong thing. So I'm just looking at the chat function at the moment. There's nothing coming through as yet. Councillors, Fee, you're online. Is there anything you would like to say or any point you'd like to make before we close off tonight?
Apologies, Andy. For some reason, I had trouble connecting in tonight. Nice to see you there, Luke. Thank you. I just am interested, and maybe I've missed it, so please tell me if I have. But do you have any thoughts around the Wi-Fi?
Yes, we have. We've had a little bit of discussion around the free
Oh,
provision.
good.
One of the options within that Wi-Fi, for instance, I said that we're looking to provide free Wi-Fi in Bulls, Martin, Taihape. People in Hunterville may want to submit and say, well, there's another option, and then you include Hunterville as well. Make sure you have your say. That's the important part. As I understand it, this conversation tonight will be loaded on Facebook. You'll be able to look at this conversation and you should be able to get either back in touch with me. But while we've got Luke here, Luke, you're the hi-fi guru in terms of that dark art of technology. Would you like to talk about that at all?
Yes, thank you, Andy. When we're talking about public Wi-Fi, it's really important we're clear that what we're talking about is something that's really quite fast and quite high quality. The experience of other councils that have been delivering public Wi-Fi is that you need to be delivering a really good, high quality, quite fast service. So you're looking at something sort of comparable to commercial broadband, and you're certainly looking about some really serious infrastructure on the sort of and on the back end to make it all work. But there is a lot of councils that have done it and have seen a lot of benefits from it. And so what we're really talking about here is being able to be basically, if you're in the town centre in Bulls, you can connect to the network, and you'll have access to basically fast broadband on your device or on your phone. Of course, within reasons, whether that be a data cap or we put in some restrictions around what sites you can access. That's really, again, options that we have. Nowadays, the technology is quite mature, so there's a lot of things you can do with it.
Yeah, I have had a question from Charlene around the process of that and the technology and the direction of 5G towers and so on. That's something that I'm not sure of the details at the moment, but when we know more around what that would entice, we'll come back to you. And that may be, Charlene, that may be an offline conversation I have with you where I get that advice. I've had another question from Candace asking, is there a draft document available to us to give feedback on? Absolutely, there will be. So as I said at the start of the meeting, and you may have missed that, normally we would have a consultation document out already. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, that's been difficult. We will have a consultation document out, we think, about the 12th of April, and the same submission period will be available, so that we've just extended a time frame. That will give you an indication of what your rates can be, with a way in which you can calculate your exact property rates. It will give debt positions, it will give the key choices, and it will include the submission form and how you can engage either in writing or electing to speak to council. Councillor Dalgety, you've got a question? Or...
I'm just interested, Andy, on this opportunity versus what's available now. Like, if someone is driving through our towns at the moment, has run out of data, would they not go into a BP or a local CAF that has that free Wi-Fi opportunity? And just like, is that's what I was thinking.
All right, what I might do is go back to Luke, who may wish to make a little bit of further comment. Then it's his specialty in terms of Wi-Fi. Is there any further thing that you would like to say, Luke? You'll need to come off. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andy, and thanks for your question. Yes, I guess people could do that if they so chose. The problem with the services, often they're not quite as high quality as what we would be looking to provide. And sometimes people have a bit of a stigma about just pulling up to somewhere random to mooch off their Wi-Fi, whereas what we'd be doing here would be something that would be explicitly sort of free and for public use.
Yep.
So,
thank you. Can
I ask another question, Andy?
Certainly.
When I think about my experience in Palmerston North with Inspire, you know, we rock in and we get the free Inspire. That it's quite, I personally find it quite a tedious login sort of situation. Would it be similar to that or not?
It could be if we so chose to make it. The discussion we've had basically is the technology is really quite mature, and we have a lot of options about how we sort of design and cater for the user experience. So we can put, you know, the landing pages and PIN codes and all that stuff in the way, or we can just have something really light to allow people to sign up once, and then whenever their device is in the neighborhood, they can connect to it without having to log in again. You know, we have options here about what sort of user experience we want.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I've had a supplementary question around the consultation document asking, will it show the assumptions and evidence that council is using? Yes, it will, is the short answer. So the assumptions will be a full separate page within the document detailing how we assume the district will be portrayed and state in the future. Remember that the consultation document is a reasonably slender document to make it concise and readable. But behind that document are asset management plans, you know, that if you stack them all up would be probably several meters high. So there's a whole lot of specific information and evidence around the decisions that we're facing, and whether it is an asset management plan for Martin Park or cemeteries and all of those sorts of things. There's a whole lot of supplementary information that can be made available. So I thank you for that. Look, I think we will look to close off in the next 2 or 3 minutes, unless there are other questions coming through. We'd also like you to think about, has this been a format that you think is worthwhile? You know, it's new for us, and you have to excuse my my slowness or style in terms of adopting all of the technology that we have available. But I think it could be extremely valuable, especially with the being able to post it back to Facebook. And in the future, we may well be able to answer a whole lot of the common threads that come up on Facebook. I don't routinely engage back with Facebook because it becomes a pseudo council site. And the first, if you have issues with the council, of course, there are a process around request for services and so on that we'll be able to highlight. But I would like very much to thank you all that are listening in or looking in tonight. I'd like to thank councillors for being online. Luke, thank you very much for your time and your expertise. And I know that you'll be available to answer some of the questions that may well come forward. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much, Karen, for coming in tonight. I know it's your time, and I appreciate the effort that you've gone to support me. I'll declare, we'll call it closed, which means that I beat the alarm system in this council building. So thank you very much for being at least part of the discussion tonight. Cheers. Lisa, can we close off, please?